Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. We're a little bit out of our routine. We're recording a day early for Wednesday night for a Thursday release.
Yeah, there's a few reasons for that, mainly because the Calgary Wild are playing tomorrow, so we wanted to preview that match and talk about some of the recent games and a few other things going on in the Calgary soccer world. I'm excited to dive into it all.
If you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
Our podcast focuses on soccer in Calgary. So we talk about the city's two professional teams, those being Cavalry FC and the Calgary Wild. But we also talk about soccer played at lower levels, including the post-secondary teams from Calgary in the fall and the League One Alberta teams from Calgary in the spring and early summer. We also talk about players from Calgary who are playing overseas or at professional levels in different countries, as well as initiatives at the grassroots and amateur levels.
And this week, our topics are going to include Cavalry FC. They played two matches since our last episode. They played Ottawa and they played in the Canadian Championship against Edmonton Scottish. We'll talk about both those games and we'll also preview their match against York United on Friday night. We'll talk about the Wild's match this past weekend in Halifax, their first ever victory. And we'll preview, well, it'll be by the time everyone hears this, tonight's match against AFC Toronto. We're going to talk about League One a bit, and we're also going to talk about the UWS.
Yeah, which is something we haven't talked about in quite a while. Talked about it a lot last year and in 2023 as well. I guess we've got a bit of news to reveal on that front. And then we also have an interview, Jason. Who is our interview with this week?
Our interview is with Cedric Bovon. He is the head coach of Calgary Blizzard, League One Alberta team, and he is also now the head coach of the University of Lethbridge Pronghorns women's team.
Yeah, this was a cool one for me. Cedric and I actually went to high school together. He was a few grades above me, but we knew each other well thanks to the NSA program at Central Memorial High School. You know, I've been pretty familiar with his coaching career for the last several years since we both moved on from high school, and it's cool to reconnect with him in this way.
Without further ado, let's get rolling and start talking about Cavalry FC.
I'm Shamit Shom. This is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So, Scott, let's talk about Cavalry. We had two matches this week. We had the league match on Saturday against Ottawa, and then the Canadian Championship match. But I guess we should probably start with the first one. Atletico Ottawa came to town Saturday afternoon, and not the greatest game from a Cavalry point of view.
No, bad day at the office. It was a 3-1 loss. All the goals came in the second half, kind of a flurry of activity in the last half an hour. It's interesting because, Jason, if you told me at halftime that this game was going to end 3-1, I probably would have guessed that it was Cavalry coming out on top because I thought, it was a really evenly fought battle in the opening 45, but Cavalry did have the better chances, and that continued into the opening minutes of the second half. But then everything changed right before the hour mark with Ottawa scoring off an own goal.
Yeah, it was an unfortunate one for Bradley Camden-Fewo. Ottawa player kind of took a shot, kind of wasn't really much of anything too threatening on the surface, but it went towards the goal, and it sort of took a wicked deflection off of his shoulder and started to spin, and it just went right into the net. There's a complete change of direction and went in.
Yeah, so Cavalry went down sort of against the run of play. I think they had a pretty decent chance just before that, and then Ottawa broke on the counterattack. Bradley Camden-Fewo's afternoon got even worse just a few minutes later when he was sent off for a direct red card after, I guess, elbowing an Atletico defender as Cavalry was preparing for a set piece.
It seemed like there was definitely a bit of malicious intent there, and there was a lot of rolling around and writhing on the pitch, which I guess is par for the course these days. But that being said, it was, I think from my point of view, it seemed pretty plausible it could be a red. And if you notice afterwards, like Camden Fawo didn't really protest too much. He just walked off and yeah.
And down 10 men, down a goal. It just got worse and worse after that. Just a minute or two later, I think Tommy Wheeldon Jr. wanted to bring on some subs. And then Ottawa made it 2-0 right off, barely a minute after the game restarted. Familiar foe, Balu Tabla, got in on the scoring action. And then I can't remember what minute it was in, but Ottawa then made it 3-0 with a goal from, he's only 18, Joachim Coulange. So 3-0. We heard some boos from around Spruce Meadows. It was a pretty rough end to the match, although Cavalry did get a consolation through Kanija Elva, who opened his account for Cavalry just a few minutes before the 90.
Probably the first half plus, it was pretty even, maybe favoring Cavalry, but yeah, it really fell apart. And I'm, we always try and take some positives out of this one, but I don't think there were tons of good ones besides, Elva opening his account. Even on that third goal, Scott, I think, wasn't there kind of a miscommunication between Veiling and debutant Levi Lang that kind of led to that third goal? I know that Cavalry was pressing hard and weren't exactly paying attention to their defensive responsibilities as much as they should. But I think that was a play where there was a bit of a mix up too. So, not exactly shining debut for our new center back.
No, just a rough half an hour plus for everybody, really. But what I will say is that obviously they spent the last half hour of this game playing against 10 men, but Ottawa looked really strong. Even in the first half, they weathered the storm when Cavalry was pressing. You could tell that both teams love to have the ball, right? I was really enjoying the first half just because they're two evenly matched teams that both like to play a possession-based style of play. And, I think after they had the man advantage, Ottawa just really showed no mercy. And we saw how good they are. And that's reflected in the table, right? They're in first place at the moment, still unbeaten with 3 wins and a draw, while Cavalry are down toward the bottom with Valor with 2 losses and a draw, putting them in 7th place.
A few days later, on Tuesday night, a very different vibe happening at this one. I know, Scott, I didn't have a chance to go to this one in person, but I know you did. But it was kind of night and day from that Saturday match.
Yeah, really interesting. As we've talked about, this was the opening round of the Canadian Championship. Cavalry taking on last year's League One Alberta champions, Edmonton Scottish United. They were always going to be the heavy favorites. Very easy outing for Cavalry. They won 6-0, 2 goals in the first half, 4 in the second. The rain started falling, Jason, around the 50th minute mark, I want to say, maybe closer to the hour. But by the end, it was pretty much pouring. Not a huge crowd. I think there was only around 2,500. Really reminded me of some of those early season games in 2019. But to be expected on a Tuesday night playing, semi-pro / amateur opposition, but tons to talk about if you think about the team that Calgary fielded, some of the storylines that emerged, really intriguing afternoon / evening for Cavalry fans who probably saw a lot of players play who they maybe haven't really gotten to become familiar with.
Absolutely. Like I've mentioned many times on the podcast, I'm always fascinated by who's on the roster, who are the new young up and coming players and what's happening. This game was like catnip for that. We got to see Joe Holiday play his first match and clean sheet, which was really nice. The guy has been around for, I don't know, this is his 3rd year, and this is the first time he's made an appearance with the first team. So that was nice. And then, you had, Nico Moroniak, who, has been, with the club now for a while. He finally got his first goal, opened his account. And then you've got, Max Pipegrass, who played very briefly with the club in 2021 as a 17-year-old. And then he's been off to university. And even last year, he was with the club as a U Sports player, but never played. Not only did he play in this match, he scored quite the goal there. The goal number 5 was a good one, wasn't it?
Oh, it was the pick of the bunch. Cavalry scored quite a few really nice goals in this game, but Max's was a stunner from 35 yards out, picked the top corner quite well. He was the player who was chosen to do the post-game press conference, and I asked him if he thought he was going to score a goal like that when he woke up that morning, and he was pretty honest and blunt. He's like, nope, had no idea. I just wanted to play tonight. So it was pretty cool to see that. And yeah, like you mentioned, there's, a lot of youngsters. James McGlinchey made his debut with a late appearance. Levi Lang had his first start. I think that was Mihail Gerasimenkov's first start. Knija Elba got his first start. He's not a youngster, but anyway. And Owen Antoniuk, he made his Cavalry debut, and that would be his first pro game since playing for Atletico Ottawa a few years ago, I think 2022. And, they really spread out the scoring, 6 goals from 6 different players, and 3 of those players, it was their first goal.
And as far as looking ahead to the next round, Cavalry will play the winner of the match coming up here on next Tuesday when Pacific plays Vancouver FC. So I don't think we know where that match is going to be or when it's going to be, but anyway, Cavalry advances to the next round.
Yeah, and the winner of the next round will take on Vancouver Whitecaps, who are having quite the season. So pretty exciting matchup for whoever wins that one.
So let's look ahead here to Friday. Cavalry is traveling to Toronto. They're going to play York United Friday night. York has continued to play pretty decently over this season. I guess you would say right now that they've probably had a better start to the season than Cavalry's had.
Well, yeah, they're in 4th place at the moment. 1 win, 1 draw, 2 losses from 4 games. I've learned my lesson, Jason. I don't want to make a prediction when I've always thought that when Cavalry takes on York, they're going to beat them. But I have no clue. York has obviously a new head coach. They've lost some of their key players from last year who've gone over to Forge. So I'm not too sure what to expect. I don't think I've seen York play a full 90 minutes yet. I've only seen bits and pieces. Obviously, they're going to be the home team. Cavalry is coming in with a rough run of league form. So it'll probably be a game that they really want to escape with something, whether that's 1 point or 3, to hopefully help turn their season around earlier than it took them last year.
I did watch actually a fair amount of the Forge York game last weekend, whether it was a 2-2 draw. I kind of had it on in the background while I was doing some other things, but I thought York looked pretty decent in that game, and they did a pretty good job of containing Forge overall. So, I don't know. I think they're a decent enough side. The Cavs will be without Bradley Camden Fable, 3-game suspension from that red card. So I'm guessing we're going to be seeing some combination of Tom Field and or Mihail Gerasimenkov in that place at left back next few games.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know who it could be. Gerasimenkov on the left, and then Tom Field slotted in right next to him at center left back, or they'll go with a back 3, and we'll have to see who it will be. But yeah, as always, excited to watch Cavalry play another game, and it's quite crazy. That'll be their 4th game in 11 days or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Hi, this is Tegan Stewart. You're listening to YYC Soccer Podcast.
So, Jason, we saw some history made by the Calgary Wild last weekend, playing at the exact same time as Cavalry Saturday, 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. They were taking on the Halifax Tides. And this was, an opportunity for them to gain their first win after losing to Vancouver the week before. And they did just that. And they did so in convincing fashion, a 4-1 win over Halifax with 3 goals in the first 25 minutes.
Yeah, and 2 goals in the first 7 minutes, I think it was. Yeah. They struck early. Michaela Moore scored the first goal in the history of the Wild. It came in off of
Tegan Stewart got the assist, but it was a free kick. Someone played it short to Tegan Stewart, and then she chipped it in. And yeah, Michaela Moore was at the back post, was able to outjump her defender and get her head on the end of it.
Mm-hmm. And then the second goal was Maggie Doherty Howard.
Yeah, this was a shot from just outside the box. It actually deflected off 2 defenders before nestling in at the bottom post. Really caught Aaron McLeod off guard. And then it didn't take too much longer before Calgary got their third, I think around the 25th minute or so. Callie Johnson, who I think, Jason, I would make an early prediction that she'll be one of the Wild's top scorers this year. She got in on the action with her first goal for the Halifax Tides were able to kind of stop the bleeding a little bit with a goal of their own.
And then for the fourth goal, Callie Johnson scored pretty late into the match to wrap it up at 4-1. So congrats to the Wild on their first victory, big one. And I haven't watched the entire match, but I've watched parts of it. And Halifax looked like a team that was playing their first game from what I got out of it. But at the end of the day, no one's going to remember that. Everyone's going to remember it's the Wild's first victory. So kudos to them.
Yeah, congrats to them. And they'll be back in action tonight as they take on AFC Toronto, who, as we've talked about, have two players, deep Calgary connections. So this will be an exciting one to see for multiple reasons.
Actually, I just realized this, Scott. Both teams are playing at York Lions Stadium one day apart.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So this will be, I know AFC Toronto played their inaugural game at BMO, but their usual home is going to be York Lions Stadium. So 5 p.m. kickoff. This game is on TSN Plus, we think. But obviously, as we've talked about, AFC Toronto has Kaylee Hunter from Calgary, 17-year-old, as well as Maya Jones. But she doesn't appear to have played yet. So we were wondering if she might be injured.
I was going to say she hasn't been in the 18 that have dressed, but actually I think in NSL, they're actually allowed to dress 20. She hasn't been in the lineup either match, but Kaylee Hunter's appeared in both matches as a substitute. And 2 weeks in a row, she's been the rookie player of the week. And she's done well. She scored the first ever AFC goal last weekend.
Yeah, I think she's quite the get for AFC Toronto. So I fully expect her to play against the Wild, which will be pretty cool to see. But overall, I mean, I've noticed that Toronto has lost both of their opening games. So I do think that the Wild has an opportunity to double their points total when they play.
For sure. And I know that there have been some pundits in the women's soccer world that were very impressed with the roster that AFC Toronto put together. So I don't feel like I would be qualified enough to analyze those statements. But I think it's safe to say that starting off 0-2 and now playing their next game at home, they're probably going to feel some pressure to perform, I think, because it would not look great to be 0-3.
Absolutely.
This is Izzy Monk, and welcome to YYC Soccer Podcast.
So for our next topic, we wanted to talk about Calgary Foothills. And, we've featured Foothills many times on the podcast over the last couple of years. And in the last couple summers, we spent a fair amount of time talking about their team in the UWS, the Women's Pro-Am League based out of the States. And we've been paying attention to sort of what's been going on with the UWS and Foothills lately. And we've come to a few conclusions, Scott.
Yeah, UWS released their schedule recently, and their Western Conference didn't show Foothills playing at all, right? So we obviously reached out to the club to ask if they were going to field a team in UWS this spring, summer. Unfortunately, they didn't get back to us. So we asked around, and we won't say who told us, but we did get confirmation from a couple of, I guess, anonymous sources who would know that they're not playing in UWS this year, which I think is unfortunate. It's a league that Foothills is featured in for nearly a decade now, and it's really high level of soccer that people can watch in the summertime. But I also think it makes a lot of sense when you consider some of the challenges of having a Canadian team in a predominantly American league. And as we know, Jason, Foothills, at least in the last couple of years, really only had one team that they had proper competition with in their conference, or in their division, rather.
Definitely. And I'm going to do a shameless plug back into our archives from July 12th of last year. We had an episode entitled, Should Foothills WFC Stick with UWS? And we kind of talked about this back then, about the merits of staying in this league. And Yeah, there's definitely issues with the league in general, some of the border stuff, just some of the levels of competition, like you were saying, Scott. There was one team that really seemed to give them a real challenge, and the other teams not so much.
No, that's you're talking about the Santa Clarita Blue Heat. And yeah, their games against Calgary Foothills were always really exciting. When the Blue Heat would come to town, they'd take each other on at Broadview usually. But every other team in that conference, and it seemed like there was always some teams coming and going, folding, and then an expansion team in a different city. It was always just a rout, it seemed like, for Foothills. I remember some of the scores last year. They played Players from Nevada, won that game 8-0. Following day, they took on FC Arizona. They won that game 4-0. And these are, by the way, away games. So this was Foothills traveling down to the States. And then another team in their conference, Los Angeles SC, they beat them last year 4-0. And then in a return game, I know that they beat FC Arizona 7-0. So the other teams, it was really not a challenge for Foothills. And then as we know, last year, 2 of their games were canceled in the second half of the season. So they actually only played 6 regular season games. And they actually lost both of their games to Santa Clarita.
Yeah, and this year Santa Clarita is not playing in UWS. They've moved on to the USLW League. So that Western Conference has changed a lot. It basically contains, I believe it's 5 other teams, and they're all sort of based in, I think, Southern California. So I can definitely see why 5 teams from Southern California would probably not love the idea about having to jump on a plane and fly to a different country to play a team, no matter who they were. Whether they, that's just money and passports and all the different things associated. Meanwhile, all their other games they can probably drive to in a bus within an hour.
Yeah, you got visa issues potentially. You can't really, it's a hassle, right? And we've seen this on the men's side as well with Calgary Foothills, which of course used to have a very successful PDL team. And with the arrival of Cavalry FC and then subsequently League One Alberta, I think the market fan-wise as well as player-wise for PDL really stopped making sense. And now we see Foothills has a competitive League One team. And on the women's side, it seems like a very similar thing is happening with the arrival of the Calgary Wild as the city's new professional women's team. There's, of course, a couple of Foothills UWS alumna on that team, like Grace Doherty and Talia White. But we also have the growth of League One Alberta, which has a Foothills team. So really the need for a high-level elite semi-pro or pro-am team in competing in UWS is the need is just not there the way it was, 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, it's probably just not worth the trouble at this point, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah, I did notice for it that some of the players that were, playing UWS last year, for example, like Izzy Monk, who when she came back from university last year, she basically pretty much exclusively played for UWS. She might have played League One like one game, but she's been announced as being a player for League One this year. So for Foothills, so that's what we're looking at. I guess that's what it is, and move forward. I think Foothills League One team is going to be pretty stacked.
Yeah, I mean League One. We're going to talk about that in our next segment, but who are some of the players we would say that really their career success can at least partially be attributed to their time in UWS? Maya Jones is the first one that comes to mind. She was a star for Foothills, especially in 2023. Like we mentioned, Talia White and Grace Doherty. I was really impressed by Grace in 2023. And then Izzy Monk last year, I thought she was a real leader for that team. So the loss of that program is probably going to strengthen the caliber of League One Alberta. It's bittersweet to lose the UWS program. I think if you think back to some of the years, I want to say 2019 and then 2022, where Foothills made it all the way to the championship, or was it 2017? I know it was one of the early seasons when Troy Flannery was still coaching that they made it all the way to the final. I think those attracted big crowds at the likes of Mount Royal University's stadium and Broadview. So there's lots of memories there.
Hi, this is Aislinn Phillips, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So Scott, we were just alluding to League One Alberta, and let's sort of get into talking about it a bit more, because this is sort of the first full weekend of action. All the Calgary teams are in action, and one of the things probably to talk about first maybe is there's been an incredible amount of player movement.
Yeah, well, we asked Cedric Bovon about that in our interview, which will air in a couple of minutes here. But it's really interesting and fascinating how quickly it's taken for several players to kind of defect from the club that they were with in 2024 and maybe 2023 and move elsewhere, right? And you've highlighted some of, I think, all of these players who we've had on the podcast at some point or another, who have moved clubs this year. So some of the highlights being Mila Schneider, who is now with Foothills after playing previously with Blizzard. Rachel Barlow is another one who's left from Blizzard and defected over to Foothills. What do you think about Foothills' defense getting Mila Schneider and Izzy Monk, as we've already talked about?
And they're also going to get Emma Schneider, Mila's sister. She's also joining too. So the two of them have played side by side at Maine for all those years and with Blizzard.
Yeah, it's quite the back line that Foothills has put together, but really neat to see that competitive player movement portal already. So I'm excited to see how the games go this week and to just follow the season in the weeks to come.
That's probably a good place to segue into our interview for this week, because we did talk a fair bit about League One Alberta with our guest this week.
All right, so let's run our chat now with Cedric Bovon. I'd like to welcome Cedric Bovon to the podcast. Cedric is the new head coach of the Blizzard Women's League One Alberta team, and he was also recently announced as the new head coach of the University of Lethbridge Pronghorns women's team. I believe he's also a lifelong Calgarian. So, Cedric, thanks for coming on our podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So I know you. We actually went to high school together, participated in the NSA program at Central Memorial quite a while back. But can you talk about your coaching background, your playing background? I remember you were a goalkeeper. How is it that you came to land these roles?
Great question. For me, I started coaching really organically as a youth player, getting an opportunity to start 16 years old and join as a youth coach and kind of got pushed into it. And there was really no plan back then. It was just, hey, here's a bag of balls, here's a group of kids and get after it. And I think that trial by fire just created that passion and that love for coaching and especially just allowed me to share, I guess, my passion for playing with the players I got to start working with. And from there, it kind of snowballed into making really good relationships within the soccer community, which led to more opportunities down the line from working with U12 teams all the way into where I'm at today. So I must say it all stems from relationship building within the soccer community.
You want to talk to us about how you landed the role? I guess we could start with maybe with the Blizzard League One team, and then we could also talk about how you ended up getting the role at Lethbridge too.
When it comes to the Blizzard League One, I've obviously been involved with our Blizzard League One program for the 2 years, initially with the exhibition series in 2023, and then again last year in the full scope of the season as an assistant coach, having the opportunity to be mentored the last 5 years at Blizzard from Diogo Raposo, who has kind of led our program, specifically the girls side for the moments or the years previous to me taking on the girls technical director role here. And then as he stepped into that sporting director role, I just had more opportunity to work with him in our adult environment. And that kind of lended itself to me getting more and more opportunity again, being around great coaches and great people, building off their experience. And ultimately, I think Diogo was looking to scope back his role a little bit with League One as he prepares for the busy Dino season with the University of Calgary. So, and I was looking to kind of take on a bigger role in advance of the opportunity I received at Lethbridge, and I guess for that, I think that that role definitely came as maybe something I wasn't expecting to jump on. It's something that opened up when in December, where their posting went up, and I think I might have applied on the second last day just to go through that process and see what an interview process for a Canada West team would look like. And ultimately, I was, fortunate to be offered that role, and I'm really looking forward to that opportunity to take on a squad and use the experience I built. Lucky enough to work with Tino Fusco at MRU for 6 years, and then the past 2 years with Diogo at Dinos, and take that experience into leading a program now at Lethbridge.
Want to ask you about how you build on last year, right? Obviously, Blizzard had a very successful year, got to compete at the Interprovincials. I imagine repeating that will be the goal, but can you talk about how you approach the 2025 campaign?
Yeah, obviously we have a little bit of turnover. We had some players kind of move off our roster, and so we promoted some from within when it comes to players that were playing in the AMSL league last year, and have been promoted into our roster this year, and players that are obviously playing in university environments as well. So that experience lends itself to this league, but our goal remains the same, to continue kind of the legacy we've started to create here in League One, and aim to fight for that top spot and push ourselves to repeat. I think that moment where we first got into the interprovincial, and even the moments kind of after the final game, we spoke about how do we get back here? How do we make sure that this remains the goal with the group? And I think the group was headstrong in that moment to say, yeah, we want to be back here in a year's time, and continue to compete, and maybe have a better showing when it comes at the interprovincial with the best quality League One teams in the country.
The first matches of the season for you are this weekend. Can we talk a bit about who's on the roster, who we can expect to see back, any particular new faces to talk about, or just give us a little bit of a preview about what we're going to see?
Absolutely. Our returning players, and I'll keynote a few that I'm sure you've spoken about on the podcast before, include the likes of Alyssa Dagnoni, who is our center forward, likely be competing for that starting spot, coming from the University of Saskatchewan. And she was one of our leading scorers in 2023, and has continued to push that level. We also are returning Aislinn Phillips from the last 2 years. Now recently a University of Calgary Dino, who will help us kind of bolster that midfield and lead our midfield all season. And another highlight, I think, in returning players, McKenna Walker, who is one of the fantastic fullbacks in the league. We rate her highly in her ability on the field and even off the field as a leader. And lastly, I would say Lauren Houghton, biggest returner. She's also going to join us in more of a coaching role this season, as we've adapted the coaching staff a little bit. So she's going to join us on the bench when she's not on the field. So she'll play that player kind of manager role a little bit this year. Some new faces into our program include Brooklyn Colvin, who's transferred across from Foothills League One, and she'll just help us to bolster some of the space that from some of the positions we've lost, or players that have moved on from our program.
Yeah, it's neat that even though we're only in year 2 or arguably 3, we're seeing those player movements right between clubs more now. But on that note, I want to ask you one last question about League One, which is, what are some of the things you're looking forward to? Obviously, it's an expanded division, so there's more competition than ever. Can you maybe talk about why it's a great league and why Calgarians should check it out, and what you're looking forward to apart from just getting the season going?
Ultimately, the extra teams means extra games, and that's always a bonus for us when we want to challenge the group to continue to grow. For us, it also creates a little bit of opportunity to push some of our athletes from our major league program and get more call-ups and opportunities to see what this league's about. When it comes to the value of the league and why people should check it out, I think the football on show is class, especially with the amount of alumni that are involved. We've got ex-pros that are still involved in the game, and then we've got current university players that, if you've been to a U Sports game, you know the quality can be outstanding. right? So ultimately, I think the value in terms of the quality of the product is continuing to improve, and for us, that's where we want to continue to rise is ultimately finish in the top spot because you want to go and compete against the best teams. But that product continues to grow if our standards remain high.
Okay, let's go back and talk about Lethbridge a little bit more. We kind of talked about it a bit earlier, but going into that season, what are you looking forward to? Like, it's a new experience for you as a head coach being in Canada West, but can you just talk about that?
Biggest pieces for me is the role in terms of head coaching, just taking on the leadership in terms of planning, in terms of periodization, in terms of what do I want the team to look like from a playing style and a game model perspective has been obviously the first little bit of the role in the last 6-8 weeks here. But I think my biggest excitement is just getting onto the pitch on the first day of preseason. I think I'm itching to get started and really start working with the players on a day-to-day basis, and competing at Canada West. Even like I said about League One, it's a privilege, and I think there's only so many players that get that opportunity in their lifetime, and I think the same goes for the coaches. It's a privilege to be a coach working in that environment and working with those types of players that are pushing themselves for whether it's the 5 years they're at university or if they've got goals in the game that they want to move into. You're helping them get there. So you're developing either the skills that they need on and off the field, and you're also providing them opportunities and pathways to get there.
I wanted to ask you, Cedric, about recruitment. So now that you're the head coach at Lethbridge, like, I think one kind of thing I've noticed this year is that competition for players must be really fierce. Like, I've seen some of the player announcements for League One Alberta, and you mentioned Brooklyn Cove, and I know that there have been players moving around, all over the league. So obviously, I think there's trying to get players, and recruitment is a real big thing. And then, of course, it's a big piece of what you need to do with the Pronghorns. So, how do you like that part of the whole process? Is that something like you've probably had to do a fair bit of it this year?
Yeah, I think that's one of the pieces I need to adjust to. And in my previous role with Dinos, I think I started to get that experience in terms of communicating with players and starting to scout games and when you're off at a tournament, maybe you're with a youth team and you're doing that on the side. I think that will become more and more of the norm for me. Ultimately, I think it's about identifying those players early on that might fit our profile, what we're looking for. Again, going back to style of play in Lethbridge, can those players that we're seeing on the pitch from in a youth perspective fit the mold of what we're looking for at the university level, and making those contacts and connections early so that players are seeing that there's opportunity to come down to Lethbridge, and maybe ultimately we're not the biggest school and might not be players' first choice when they're doing their research, but the more time I've spent down there, I've been very impressed with the campus and the facilities that are on offer, and I can say there's plenty of opportunity for players that want to play in a place like Lethbridge and with the Pronghorns.
Thank you so much for coming to the podcast. We're looking forward to covering another League One season, and maybe we'll check in with you later on.
Sounds good. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate the time.
All right. Well, thanks again to Cedric for doing the interview with us. I thought it was a pretty interesting chat. I'm kind of impressed with the whole balancing act of, trying to balance out, being the head coach of a Canada West team and then still having your club responsibilities, your responsibilities to the League One. I'm sure these guys have really busy summers.
Oh, you can imagine every weekend, hey, morning till night. I know a lot of coaches, and yeah, it's quite the lifestyle, but they love it. So, Cedric is filling some big shoes, right? Diogo achieved a lot with that program, and I think he's still going to be involved quite heavily, but it's really Cedric's time to see what he can do with the program.
As far as matches for this week, as I mentioned earlier, every team is going to be playing. Now, a couple of the teams will be playing up at Edmonton, but I thought I would just highlight at least the two matches. Well, I guess they're really double headers when it comes right down to it, that are going to be played in Calgary this weekend. They're both on Friday evening.
Yeah, one is at the West Soccer Dome. This is between Callies United and Foothills. The women will get things going at 5:50, and then a late kickoff for the men, those same two teams, because League One always does double headers. That will kick off at 7:45. And then over at West Island College, Jason, I didn't know about this particular field, but Villains will be taking on BTB from Edmonton, with the women playing at 6:50 and the men playing at 8:45. So a very late kickoff for Villains versus BTB on Friday night.
Yeah, so I had to do a little research. I did not know where or what West Island College is, but it is a private school that is very close to the Calgary Farmers Market original location. And I think the school's been there for a while, but essentially what they've done is they've turned one of the parking lots behind the school into a turf field. I've seen pictures. I haven't seen it in person, but it looks like a nice little facility there. So it doesn't have like massive capacity, like it doesn't have like a big stand or anything like that, but it's got looks like a nice size field, lights. I think it's got some amenities and stuff. So it could be a place where, we could see matches in the future. I know this first match, I know it's very close to Villain's home base, but yeah, it might be a place we see more and more.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited by that. It's probably the closest field to me personally, where I live in Calgary. So it's the most accessible. I know the West Soccer Dome, it takes me 25 plus minutes to drive out there. So don't imagine I'll be getting out to that side of the city very often this spring, summer, but Wick, as West Island College is traditionally called, much closer. So it's more doable for me. If you're hungry for local soccer action, Friday night's got you covered, because the way that those games are kind of staggered, you could potentially watch some of all four if you had your heart set on it.
Scott, you and I have been chatting here a bit, and we've kind of come to a decision here, making a bit of an announcement here about how we're going to handle this deluge of matches.
Yeah, we've been going weekly for, I guess, more than 2 years now, releasing weekly episodes, and they've been getting longer and longer because I think we just find so much stuff to talk about every week that and we delve deeper into the games and the news than we did at first. So you had the suggestion that we move to releasing 2 shorter episodes each week, which I agree is the right choice for a couple of different reasons. So we're going to start doing that next week.
This is kind of an evolving process on how exactly it's going to work. But I think right now what we've got mapped out is we're going to record Sunday night for a Monday morning release. And that episode is going to be mostly covering what happened on the weekend, talking about the results of all the various, Cavalry, Wild, League One matches that happened over the weekend. And then our usual Thursday night recording, Friday morning release is going to be more, I think, more in the structure of what we do right now. That will be where we're going to probably have our feature interview and, the format that we've typically had, although we're not going to really have to spend the time talking about what happened last week, which, by the way, at that point in time, it's already happened quite a while ago.
But you're right that most of the games we talk about are 5 days old by the time our episodes come out, if not older. I think a lot of listeners, they appreciate our conversations about those games, but they do know what happens. So from that perspective, I think a Monday morning release makes a lot more sense to recap the games. And then, we'll try to continue having different discussions and those feature interviews that I think we're becoming known for in our Friday morning episodes.
Yeah, we'll see how this all goes. I think right now, sort of, at least our plan at this point right now is to try to maintain this the best we can during the League One Alberta season, because there's just so much content. And then, we'll kind of take it from there. But I think that, there's just going to be so many matches the next couple months that I think we'll give this a shot, see how it goes.
Excited to get going on it. Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast sharing platforms. Please check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archives and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links to buy my book online, which is about the history of professional soccer in Calgary. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media, such as Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, where our username is @YYCSoccer403. Thanks for listening.